So, um, picture this. It's 1962, and a philosopher is sitting in a room in London,
Okay.
and he's looking out at this group of, highly educated, really successful people. And he basically tells them that their drive to be better, like the very thing that made them successful, is actually destroying the world.
Wow. Yeah, that is a staggering premise to just drop into a room of high achievers.
Right, because he's arguing that the whole engine of their lives, their ambition, is actually this psychological poison.
Which is wild because, I mean, we are conditioned from childhood to believe the exact opposite.
We really are.
We're taught that the desire to improve, to, acquire more knowledge and get ahead is the fundamental basis of a healthy life. To have someone dismantle that entirely, piece by piece, it challenges the core operating system of modern society.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today. Welcome to a custom-tailored deep dive made just for you, the listener. We're going to be exploring the transcript of that exact conversation featuring J. Krishnamurti.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to examine this radical challenge to ambition. We're going to look at why the urge to acquire and succeed might actually be the root of all this internal and external conflict we experience.
And importantly, how shifting the way you process reality could unlock a completely different way to exist.
Right. But before we get too far, we should probably establish up front that this transcript is not some sort of lecture.
Yeah, not at all.
It's not a guru handing down a new set of rules for everyone to memorize.
Yeah, Krishnamurti explicitly tells the room that he is not laying down a dogma for them to accept or reject. The invitation here is for like a mutual uncovering of facts.
A mutual uncovering. I like that.
It's really collaborative. And examining a small group discussion from 1962 about societal pressures, well, it feels incredibly relevant today, especially given that we're operating in an era where the pressure to optimize and compete is just, it's omnipresent.
It's everywhere. You can't escape it. But okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even touch the concept of ambition, the source material forces us to look at the mechanics of perception itself.
Right, how we actually see the world.
Yeah. The transcript suggests that to understand our societal conditioning, we first have to recognize how heavily our own memories act as a screen. Like, they screen us from reality.
He focuses heavily on what he calls the act of seeing.
Which involves a difference between what he calls induced humility and a genuine freshness of mind. Right?
Exactly. The text describes two entirely different modes of operating. So the first is induced humility. And this is a calculated posture.
Like faking it.
Kind of, yeah. Think of a vain person who realizes that arrogance is socially unappealing, right? So they train themselves to act humble, or, someone following a strict ascetic code because they believe it'll make them righteous.
So it's something you have to actively do.
Exactly. It requires constant effort and maintenance. It's an artificial overlay. True humility, the text argues, emerges naturally from a state of not knowing.
Not knowing.
Right. It comes from the sheer intensity of observing something without immediately referencing the past.
And the example in the transcript that I think really clarifies this involves a child looking at a flower.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah, because a young child, before being run through the machinery of formal education, sees a flower and simply experiences the pure sensation of it. The color, the shape, the actual presence of the thing.
Because they don't have a word for it yet.
Exactly. But the moment the intellect takes over, the moment we teach the child the word flower, and we start categorizing its species and its use, this screen comes down. The direct experience is completely replaced by a label.
The naming of the thing replaces the experiencing of the thing.
Right.
And the text argues that as we accumulate knowledge, we lose direct contact with reality. We stop seeing the new leaf in spring or the cloud in the sky as unique, immediate facts.
We just see our memory of them.
We do. We look at the world through this really dense filter of everything we've already concluded.
I see this happen constantly in professional environments, especially when tackling a really complex problem at work.
Oh, for sure. How so?
Well, you encounter an issue, and instead of actually looking at the unique parameters of the problem right in front of you, you immediately project your past experiences onto it.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You say, oh, I've seen a bug like this before, or this is just like the Q3 marketing failure.
Yet the labels come out.
Exactly. Your expertise, like your cleverness and verbal capacity, actually blinds you to the simple, actual facts of the present situation. You are so busy knowing that you forget how to actually see.
What's fascinating here is that Krishnamurti frames this state of empty watchfulness This ability to look at a problem or a flower without the burden of memory as the highest form of maturity.
Really? Maturity.
Yeah, it is not a regression to ignorance. It's a state where you have experienced life, understood the limitations of the intellect, and deliberately chosen to step beyond it.
So you're not aggressively trying to acquire more information to protect yourself.
Right. You are simply observing.
Okay, but when we lose that capacity for pure observation, the text says we start relying on substitutes to navigate the world.
And those substitutes can be dangerous.
Yeah. And according to the text, the primary substitute we adopt is the psychological structure of society itself. Because we're no longer grounded in the reality of the present moment, we become deeply vulnerable to the conditioning of our environment.
And society, as defined in this specific 1962 discussion, is the interrelationship between individuals.
Right.
But it's an interrelationship that has been entirely organized around function, acquisition, and comparison. Society does not value the freshness of mind.
It definitely doesn't.
It actively demands acquisitiveness. It takes the feeling of jealousy and the drive of ambition, and it rebrands them as the noble pursuit of progress.
It's incredible how we fall for that. The transcript actually breaks down the grammar of an ambitious thought, and it's honestly kind of unsettling in its simplicity.
What was the phrase?
The core operating thought of ambition is, quote, I was, and I am not. I want more.
Right. I want more.
It's fundamentally rooted in a deep sense of inadequacy. You feel inferior, you feel insufficient in the present moment, and so you generate this desperate desire to become superior in the future.
And from that single seed of comparison springs an appalling ruthlessness.
Appalling ruthlessness. That's a strong phrase.
It is, but the text traces a direct line from this internal feeling of insufficiency to nations competing commercially on the global stage,
Oh, wow.
to students destroying themselves with stress in universities, and even to artists competing to produce a, quote, better novel or a better painting than their peers.
So it scales up from the individual to the whole world.
Exactly. The entire structure of society is built on this endless, grinding cycle of antagonism and comparison.
Okay, I have to push back here on behalf of the listener. Because if I'm listening to this right now, my immediate visceral reaction is resistance.
Which is totally natural.
Right, because if we completely deny ambition, if I stop trying to acquire more and be better, won't I just stagnate?
That's the fear.
If I accept my current state of inadequacy and do nothing about it, won't I just vegetate on the couch for the rest of my life? I mean, a participant in the London discussion raises this exact concern. It sounds like a recipe for absolute apathy.
It really does, and it's the most common defense mechanism against this philosophy. We conflate ambition with vitality.
We think they're the same thing.
We do. But Krishnamurti's counter-argument is that ambition is actually what drains our vitality.
Wait, really? How?
Because ambition is a state of becoming, constantly striving to be something you currently are not.
Okay.
And becoming requires a massive expenditure of energy because it involves constant internal contradiction and struggle. You're fighting a war against your present self on behalf of a hypothetical future self.
So the effort of comparing myself to my peers or, stressing over my 5-year plan, that is actively siphoning off the energy I could be using to actually live in the present.
Precisely. That is exactly the argument. The text asserts that fully recognizing the poisonous nature of ambition doesn't lead to laziness. It actually releases tremendous vitality.
Because you're not fighting yourself anymore.
Yes. When you drop the exhausting, heavy machinery of becoming, all of the psychological energy that was previously wasted on envy and internal conflict is suddenly available to you.
Okay, that reframing makes sense logically, but I think it demands a practical example.
Let's do it.
If a person is no longer driven by the need to climb the ladder, what motivates them to act at all?
Right.
The transcript features this brilliant debate that grounds this abstract idea. The group discusses a headmaster who wants to build a new, incredibly rigorous academic school.
I remember this part.
Yeah, and the participants want to know, is this headmaster being ambitious? Because building a school is a huge action.
The distinction Krishnamurti draws here relies entirely on the internal mechanism of the action, not the scale of the project itself.
Okay, break that down.
So, if the headmaster is building this massive school for kudos, for public recognition, or because he's enamored with the idea of being seen as an extraordinary leader, then the action is poisoned by ambition.
The ego is involved.
Exactly. The self, the ego, is the primary beneficiary. The school is just a vehicle for the headmaster's self-aggrandizement.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because if the headmaster is building the school simply because he loves the act of teaching,
Yes.
if he's doing the work purely for the joy of the work itself, then the concept of ambition completely vanishes. There is no self trying to get a reward. He's producing something rigorous and beautiful simply because he cannot help but do it.
That's the key. When absolute love for an action exists, the need for comparison evaporates.
You don't even think about other people.
You do not need to measure your work against someone else's work if you are wholly consumed by the joy of the process.
It's its own reward.
But the tragedy, as highlighted in the text, is that society cannot tolerate this kind of pure action. Society constantly encroaches on this love, injecting the demand to monetize it, to scale it, to become famous, or to be recognized as a big person in your field.
I mean, you can see this happen all the time right now with hobbies.
Oh, absolutely.
You might start baking bread or, I don't know, writing code or painting purely because the sensory experience brings you joy. You completely lose track of time. You aren't comparing your loaf of bread to a professional bakery's loaf.
Right, you're just baking.
But the moment someone tells you, hey, you should start a side hustle, sell your work, build a brand, the joy just codles into work. The love is replaced by the anxiety of competition and this need for external validation.
And this brings the group in 1962 to a wall. Once they logically agree that ambition is a poison that destroys the love of action, their immediate reaction is to ask for a methodology to cure themselves.
They want the step-by-step guide.
Exactly. They repeatedly ask how to drop their ambition. They start negotiating. They suggest thinking about it, analyzing it, and perhaps making a plan to drop their ambition tomorrow or next week.
And Krishnamurti calls this out as the ultimate trap of ideation. The moment you ask how to do something or schedule it for tomorrow, you have taken a psychological reality and turned it into an intellectual concept.
You've abstracted it.
Yeah, you've abstracted the problem so you don't have to deal with it right now. Time becomes an evasion tactic.
And the text highlights a deeply uncomfortable truth here. We use time to delay dropping ambition because, fundamentally, we enjoy the dividends of the poison.
Oh, that hurts.
It does. We want the prestige, the financial advantages, and the feeling of climbing the heap. We only want to be free of the anxiety and the pain that accompanies the climb.
We want to have our cake and eat it too.
Exactly. We are trying to negotiate a deal where we keep the rewards of ambition but discard the suffering, which is an impossibility.
The analogies used in the transcript to expose this delay tactic are really stark. Like if you walk into your kitchen and see a bottle of liquid clearly marked poison.
Right.
You do not sit down, write a 5-step plan, and decide to stop drinking the poison by next Thursday.
No, you don't.
You don't take a sip and say, I'll think about dropping this tomorrow. The physical danger is immediate, so your action is immediate.
A poisonous snake is another example he uses. You don't conceptualize your relationship to the snake.
Yes, vous.
Exactly. You don't ask for a method to move away from it. The perception of the danger and the action of stepping back are completely simultaneous.
So why then does the human brain process physical danger so differently than psychological danger?
That's a great question.
Because if the pain of envy and comparison and ruthless competition is actively destroying our vitality, why do we treat it like a philosophical puzzle instead of, say, a hot stove? You don't read a book on thermodynamics to decide to pull your hand off a hot burner. The pain forces the action instantly.
This raises an important question, and the transcript suggests that we fail to act because we are not actually in direct emotional contact with the danger of our own ambition.
We aren't feeling the heat of the stove.
We understand it intellectually, but we do not feel the heat. Krishnamurti uses the analogy of driving a car while severely sleep-deprived to explain the state.
Oh, I've been there. When you are sleepy behind the wheel, your reactions are sluggish. You're drifting across a lane, conceptually aware that driving tired is bad, but you aren't doing anything about it. You're kind of numb.
Exactly. Then a near miss occurs.
Right.
You drift too far and nearly strike a pedestrian or an oncoming truck. In that fraction of a second, you are no longer conceptualizing the danger of sleepy driving.
You are awake.
Wide awake. You are in direct, terrifying emotional contact with the reality of a fatal crash. The necessity to survive takes over, and you pull the car over immediately. There's no negotiation there.
So, with our societal conditioning, we are the driver before the near miss. Society has heavily drugged us with its constant reinforcement of competition and status.
We're asleep at the wheel.
We feel the low-level hum of inadequacy. We feel the sorrow of constantly comparing ourselves to others. But the drug is so pervasive that our reflexes are just shot. We keep drinking the poison while endlessly discussing the theoretical concept of stopping.
Which forces the conversation toward the most difficult implication of the entire deep dive.
The million-dollar question.
Right. Suppose an individual actually wakes up at the wheel. They achieve that direct emotional contact. They see the ambition as poison, and they drop it completely.
Okay.
They stop striving for status. They stop comparing. How does a person like that function within a society that relies exclusively on ambition to operate?
Yeah, the transcript does not sugarcoat the outcome of that. The person who truly drops ambition becomes a complete outsider. They step off the societal game board entirely.
Completely off.
They no longer belong to any group competing for dominance, whether that's national, religious, corporate, whatever.
Right.
And society, according to the text, cannot tolerate a person it cannot categorize or leverage.
Society's response to the outsider is extreme. Because an individual without ambition is immune to the usual levers of fear and reward, society seeks to either destroy them or elevate them as a saint to be worshipped.
Right, put them on a pedestal so they aren't a threat anymore.
Either reaction serves to neutralize the outsider. The overarching demand from society is always assimilation. Come back, join our structures, and help us reform the system from the inside.
And this demand for assimilation sparks an intense debate in the transcript about guilt and worldly suffering. Because one participant brings up the crushing poverty of refugees in Hong Kong and the violence of a boy being shot while trying to escape East Germany.
Keep in mind, this is 1962, so these were the very real, immediate headlines of the day.
Absolutely. And the participant feels a profound, heavy guilt and an emotional obligation to engage with these worldly horrors. They feel that stepping away from societal ambition is tantamount to just abandoning these suffering people.
To address this, Krishnamurti introduces the concept of dimensions of action. He points out that the participant's frantic guilt is taking place entirely within the horizontal dimension.
Okay, stop right there, because horizontal dimension is the kind of philosophical jargon that can completely lose a listener. What does that actually mean in the physical world?
Fair point. So the horizontal dimension represents the timeline of human history and societal progress as we currently understand it. It is the realm of constant reaction.
Okay, cause and effect.
Yes. In the horizontal dimension, one ambitious leader causes a crisis like a war or artificial poverty, and then other people use their own ambition to fight that leader, enact reforms, and push history forward.
So it's just fighting fire with fire.
Exactly. It's a continuous, flat timeline of replacing one competitive structure with a slightly modified competitive structure. The participant's guilt is a reaction born from this exact timeline.
So to step into a non-horizontal dimension
Is to step completely off that timeline. It is to address reality in the vertical present moment rather than pushing for a conceptual future. Krishnamurti challenges the participant. What is your factual relationship to the events in Hong Kong or East Germany while sitting in a room in London?
Right.
Generating frantic emotional guilt from thousands of miles away accomplishes nothing practically, but it successfully keeps you entangled in the psychological machinery of society.
So what does this all mean? How is that not just apathy?
It sounds like it, I know.
Because if I refuse to be ambitious, even if it's the ambition to rise to power so I can reform a corrupt government, how does my non-participation actually help a refugee?
Because the philosophy demands that we look at causality.
Right.
The extreme poverty and the political violence are not isolated accidents.
Right.
They are the direct, inevitable symptoms of a society built on ambition, nationalism, and ruthless acquisition. The disease of the world is caused by the mindset of competition.
Oh, I see. So the refugee crisis is the end result of the ladder everyone is trying to climb.
Exactly. The logic is that you cannot cure a disease by participating in the mindset that generates the disease. You cannot fight ambition with more ambition, even if you label your ambition righteous reform.
That is a huge paradigm shift.
By completely refusing to participate in the psychological structure of envy and acquisition, the outsider's very existence becomes a profound positive action. You are starving the machinery of conflict by refusing to be a node of conflict yourself.
That is staggering, because it means that stepping away isn't an act of cowardice or running away. It's addressing the root cause of the world's violence by extinguishing the source of that violence within your own mind.
Yes.
You stop waiting for a new politician or a modified economic system to fix the symptoms tomorrow, and you take absolute responsibility for your own psychological state today.
You stop drinking the poison, And in doing so, you stop validating the existence of the poison bottle for everyone else.
For you listening to this deep dive, the journey through this 1962 transcript demands a radical reevaluation of your daily life.
It really does.
We started by exploring the mechanics of perception, how our educated minds lose the ability to look at a simple flower or a complex problem with the fresh, unnamed innocence of a child. We allow our memories to screen us from reality.
Because we lose our footing in the present reality, we fall back on the psychological structure of society, which teaches us that our feelings of inadequacy can only be solved by the endless, exhausting cycle of ambition and comparison.
And we recognize that this ambition isn't vitality. It's a drain on our energy. True vitality only exists when an action is performed out of absolute love for the action itself, completely devoid of the self's desire for kudos or recognition.
And yet, when confronted with this, our instinct is to delay.
We always put it off.
We use time and intellect to negotiate with our own psychological pain, promising to drop our ambition tomorrow so we can keep enjoying the fleeting rewards of status today.
We remain like that sleepy driver, vaguely aware of the danger, but too drugged by societal conditioning to actually pull over. The ultimate challenge of the text is to achieve that direct emotional contact with the danger of your own ambition, and to step completely out of the horizontal timeline of competition.
It is about recognizing that you cannot create peace in the world if your internal world is built on the grammar of wanting more than your neighbor.
So true.
If we bring this all the way down to the reality of your day tomorrow,
Yeah, let's make it practical.
next time you feel a surge of anxiety, a pang of inadequacy, or a desperate need to achieve something just to prove your worth to your peers, pause. Look at the mechanism of that thought. Ask yourself, are you engaging in this task out of a genuine, uncorrupted love for the work?
Or are you just blindly drinking from the bottle-marked poison because the people around you insist that it tastes like progress?
What would your life actually look like if you stopped comparing yourself to who you were yesterday or who you think you need to become tomorrow?
It's a question that requires the intensity of seeing to truly answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this custom deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep trying to look at the world without the heavy screen of memory, and we will catch you next time.